So let's take the discussion forward with Harshad Patwardhan, CIO Equities of Edelweiss AMC, joining us today. Harshad, what's the framework you're adopting in this kind of a market right now? Looking at how recovery, how earnings, etc., how flows are actually panning out. What's your broad framework to approach the market right now?
Thanks first for having me on your show. So when you look at the important points at this point of time, firstly we have to recognize that Indian economy is past its worst. I think you did discuss about the economic 2Q print. So clearly there is a contraction, but it is better than expected, and it's a big bounce from what we saw in first quarter. So that's point number one. Second, as a result of which, after a very, very long time in 2Q reporting season, we saw earnings surprise. Earnings growth is likely to accelerate. Already we have seen, I think probably after a gap of 4 years, earning upgrades coming from analysts. So I do believe that after growing at only about 2% over the last 6-7 years, earnings growth trajectory will accelerate significantly into double digit over the next few years. Thirdly, a lot of big structural reforms. So the government hasn't really wasted this crisis. They have come out with structural reforms which will improve the potential growth rate. And fourthly, you mentioned about the FII flows. I think globally, if you see, there is a risk on. Not only that India has got money, many other emerging markets have also received good inflows. So foreign investors' appetite is good, enthusiastic. And finally, the vaccine trigger is here. I remember when this crisis started, we did not know when it will end, because a medical crisis needed a medical solution. And finally, we have at least the beginning of the end of the healthcare crisis. So if you put it all together, I believe that equities will probably continue to do well. And the risk at this point of time is if you are underweight on equities.
Right. How would you really recommend investors in asset allocation right now? What has happened is that after the 3-year kind of a drought, flows have just started entering mid cap, small caps. It was all large cap led rally, even if you look at March lows till now. How would you recommend a balanced approach or a multi-cap kind of a approach right now? Where do you see good margin of safety, earnings growth, all of that? What are your thoughts there?
We are looking ahead as to what might happen. We should just recall that in 2018 and 2019, mid caps and small caps massively underperformed large caps. And even within large caps, I'm sure your viewers remember that the market was only a handful of stocks. So it was a very narrow kind of market that we saw over the last 2 years, 18-19. We believe that going forward, and frankly in 2020, we have already seen signs of that. I expect broader market to do better than the large caps. So I would expect for somebody particularly having a long-term view, 3 to 5 year kind of view on the market, they are likely to make more money in mid caps and small caps. I think large caps will lag, and to that extent, instead of large caps, it may be a good idea to play it through multi-cap funds, which are relatively small in size, so that they can be very swift in changing the allocation between large cap, mid cap, small cap.
Right. What kind of flows are you actually witnessing in your own fund? What kind of queries are you getting from your investor fraternity when you interact with them across the country? Do you see people want to increase their allocation towards equities, or are they still sitting on the sideline? What's the mood like?
Yeah, on the contrary, we have seen big redemptions coming in mutual funds. So we ourselves are a very small player of the industry, but even if you look at the industry numbers, for the last several months we have seen very, very strong outflows from mutual funds. So we have a very interesting situation that foreigners are more positive on Indian market than the domestic investors. And I won't blame domestic investors for that, because if you recall the way the market bounced back after falling in March, I think it unnerved many investors. In fact, if you recall, there was a raging debate in our industry and even on the media as to whether there is a disconnect between market levels and fundamentals of the economy, which is why we have seen redemptions over the last 3 years. I believe November will be a record month of redemptions, if I am not mistaken, just as it is going to be a record month of inflows for foreign investors. So I will urge our distribution partners, so IFAs and end clients, to really reconsider that many things are changing. As I explained in the beginning, economy has bottomed out, earnings growth trajectory is improving, government has pushed through important reforms, and the risk on trade globally is there. So I will urge distribution partners and end investors to see if they are underweight on Indian equities. I think if they are underweight on Indian equities, chances are that that will be an opportunity loss from a long-term perspective. So right now, I think people are very diffident coming into the market, but I believe they should shed their diffidence, and especially if you are underweight, start investing.
Harshad, let me tell you that your fund may be small right now in the industry, but they're quite popular. I myself interacted with many large brokers across the country, especially the small cap fund of yours has got a very good popularity and admiration among the investor community. Talk to us about how overall your funds are done versus the industry.
So particularly if you look at our mid cap and small cap fund, I think they have done very well. I'm sure each of your viewer has his own way of looking at performance, so let me not dwell too much into it. But one of the most important things that we do here is that we stick to the mandate. In the sense, in our small cap fund that you are very kindly referring to, you will realize that we don't own a single large cap stock, and also we don't take cash calls. So being invested in genuine small cap and mid cap has really benefited both our funds, small cap as well as mid cap.
Right. All right, Mr. Patwardhan, we'll let you go on that one. Thanks so much for joining us. Look forward to having more of you on the channel as far as market discussions go. Let's take a short break on that note, but don't go anywhere. More news and analysis will be there after this break. Container Corp, that particular stock is down 1.5% right now because the divestment has been delayed to the next fiscal. We'll get you some more analysis on it after this break.